Welcome to Real Estate Unlimited, your go-to podcast for all things real estate. I'm Bill Jones, an experienced real estate broker and auctioneer, and together with my wife Kelly, we've built a thriving real estate business in Tiffin and Findlay, Ohio. But enough about us, let's talk about why we're here. Whether you're buying or selling or simply curious about the real estate market, the Real Estate Unlimited podcast is designed for you. Each episode will bring you insightful interviews with industry professionals, from real estate agents, mortgage brokers, home inspectors, and home designers. We'll dive deep into the ins and outs of the market, offering tips, advice, and insider knowledge. Our goal is to make real estate accessible and engaging for everyone. We promise to keep things entertaining and educational with a conversational style that makes learning about real estate fun. Plus, we'll answer your questions so you can get the information you need. And for my fellow real estate agents out there, we'll have special segments just for you. We want to help you grow your business just as we've grown ours. From tips on client acquisition to the latest market trends, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on all the social media platforms for updates, short clips, and more. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and of course you'll find the full episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Engage with us there, send us your questions, and let us know who you'd like to see as a guest on the next show. Be sure to tune into Real Estate Unlimited. We can't wait to take the real estate journey with you. We'll see you in the next episode.
Hello and welcome back to the Real Estate Unlimited podcast. My name's Sierra Steinmetz.
I'm Carrie Steele.
Bill Jones.
And we're the Jones Home Team.
And we got a special guest here today. You may notice our Brian Shuby got a little bit taller. We've got none other than Mr. Dustin Cleveland of Seneca Spray Foam. He is an expert in spray foam, raising children, chickens, broken fences, inappropriate real estate memes, and marrying way out of his league.
Yes,
So
nailed it.
Yeah. So we'll have him fill in. We'll talk real estate. We'll talk spray foam. We have some trivia questions that we're going to put to you and put to the audience both then. So if you're watching, you'll be able to see some of this. If not, you can kind of chime in where you can. So we would love the comments. Make sure you get on those for some of our giveaways. So Dustin, I guess why don't you jump into, to introduce yourself. So
I am Dustin Cleveland. I'm part owner of Seneca Foam and Encapsulation. We specialize in spray foam insulation and other insulation needs. Like you mentioned, been married for 6 years, got 5 kids. And yeah, I mean, and I have chickens.
Chickens inside and outside both. Then I don't know if we'll get into all that then, but
right.
But he's one of my favorite people. He's our first guest. He was dying to get on here and couldn't wait to join us. So we're glad to have you, man.
I'm just here to bring the average Joe point of view.
And that's kind of what we're looking for. So we're going to go to some boring real estate stuff, to facts and things like that to cover. Chime in wherever you like. And then so we'll get into some spray foam topic then too. So first kind of topic we're going into, I guess one kind of a mixed topic would be affordability and what the pricing is looking like. So we get a lot of people still on the fence waiting for, I guess, I don't know what, the 2008 crisis again or what they're looking for. There's still very little inventory. But I'll read a little bit of this right here. So U.S. house prices are forecast to rise more than 4% next year. So just a little quick interlude then. Seems like everybody's waiting for rates to come down. We'll talk about that here in a second as well. But they're waiting for rates to come down and for some reason thinking pricing is going to come down. Rates haven't moved too much recently. And then the pricing definitely hasn't gone down, even with the lack of inventory or a little bit of a slowdown. But if they're waiting until next year, they might be looking for even more. So Goldman Sachs forecasts that U.S. home prices will rise by 4.5% this year and 4.4% in 2025, higher than earlier estimates. So it's actually ticked up then. So this report attributes to the loosening of the labor market, allowing the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, driving more mortgage rates down. So again, everybody's waiting for that. So despite these affordability challenges, strong demand for housing, especially home ownership or the peak group of 30 to 39. So I guess if I go on and on, we can read into that. But so pricing isn't coming down by the sounds of it. Real estate's local. I'd say our Tiffin Findlay market, I'm kind of seeing the same thing. I mean, what are you guys seeing?
I feel like we've always said that too. Like prices are always going to keep going up just like everything else does. And there's not a lot you can do about that.
I saw a meme this morning and it said, in 2019, you were waiting for prices to drop. And then it said 2025. How's that working for you?
That's so true. It never really just...
No, I had a conversation over the weekend with somebody and they have been watching and waiting and watching and waiting. And I'm like, okay, if they would have purchased when I first started watching, saw them watching and waiting, they would already have equity in whatever property they would have purchased back when they first started.
Right.
It's like you keep waiting and even when you look outside of the broad scheme of real estate and you have an investment idea in your mind, the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and if you just think about like houses that sold in 2018 compared to what that value is now, just based on, as long as it's taken care of and not falling apart, based on just how prices have moved, how much higher that has to be in that amount of time. Then
I'm glad you said that too, because people still have this idea that the houses that are completely falling apart are still worth those that are, not that it's cheap real estate, because it's still not, but then people are still putting a sticker on it that it's relevant to something that's been completely redone, new wiring, etc. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Now, I guess I have a question. Do you think the forecast of the price raise has to do anything with the Fed's cutting interest rates?
Right. I would say probably yes. We'll get into that in a minute here too for the rates. I think everybody's waiting for this big drop in interest rates. So the Fed cutting rates doesn't actually tie directly to mortgage. I mean, it does, but I think everybody priced in. I'm going to say everybody, like the mortgage people, the whole industry priced in. They knew the rates were coming down, so it wasn't a big surprise. So them going 50 versus 25 made a difference, but I think everybody's still waiting for the next 2 rate cuts that are going to come up then too. So I don't know what that'll do for pricing though. I mean, I just feel like it's going to drive it up if rates come down more.
Because it's all supply and demand. Like you said, if you can get a better rate, more people are going to be willing to get pre-approved, and then all of a sudden everyone wants a house, and then you have to jack it up. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, it seems to be there's still a lot of demand, a lot of buyers, but I think it'll just intensify then too. If the rates come down, there's going to be a lot more people that are going to say, well, I'm back in the game then, or I can afford more house, because when the rates go up, your buying power goes down. So I guess you drive around a lot. I mean, you see a lot of houses that didn't seem to be for us, but
I think in your previous podcast, what you guys talked about was, I think a lot of it's location. Just last week I was up towards Fremont along the river, towards Huron, Lakeside, things like that. It seems like those kind of areas, I see a lot of houses that are up for sale. But just kind of your general rural area, I think I don't see quite as much.
Sure. Yeah, and some of that stuff. And the next article, we'll jump right into that then. So housing turnover rates hits a 30-year low. So as far as for that, I just kind of highlight a couple things. So of the homes listed this year, many have gone stale because of the lack of demand, especially homes which needed a little extra work. This is coming from Redfin. With the majority of the homeowners locked into low mortgage rates, the rates will need to continue to fall for people to feel comfortable moving from the deals they secured years ago. So I feel like that's a big part of it too. We've talked about this too. Everybody's already in a good rate, and I mean, you guys bought a few years ago. I mean, do you know what your rate is now?
It's around 3%.
Right. Yeah. So doesn't that sound great to go buy a house at 7 or 8%? I think that's kind of everybody's locked in. So, so going further in the study, so from 2012 to 2024, we're looking at that data. Is determined that this year's rate marks the lowest in the past 30 years. So the amount of inventory and the amount of sales is the lowest it's been in 30 years. So that doesn't make it good for us in the real estate industry when we're trying to sell houses, and it's the lowest it's been in 30 years. So I don't know. That's tough. And I don't know what changes that. I think if rates keep coming down, it sounds like we're just beating a dead horse with that then too. But I don't know what the solution is.
I do feel though too, it gives the age group of people that are younger first-time home buyers that are like those blue-collar people that have been just saving so much money because they make very good money, and they might have been in mom and dad's house the past couple of years, so they've just been saving all of this for so long, and now it's getting to a point where the rates are at a more appropriate percentage for them to want to move and get their own place and start that next step. So then, and now also a lot of them can afford more than they intended to because they've been saving money waiting for something like this to happen where they weren't getting locked into 7 or 8%, something like that. They can maybe get a 5 and put a decent down payment down. That's a very specific and niche, but I've just noticed that a lot with the first-time home buyers I've had in the past year. It's been a lot of those more like tradespeople and whatnot that have been wanting to get out of mom and dad's house but not quite ready just because it was such a large commitment and interest rates were high and this, that, and the other, and now they're finally getting to a point where it seems more feasible now.
And finding the right house. I mean,
Right.
I think even if you talk about you're locked in at 3, would you buy a house for 7 to 8%? It depends how motivated you are to move at that time and what that property has to offer. Because we've seen more and more coming up here just really recently, like in the last 30 days, where it's like, wow, something seems to be shifting here locally. We need people to come off of the, whatever the house is, whether it's a condo, whether it's the middle house, maybe, but like first time home buyers can't get into the middle level house. The middle level people can't move to the condos until the condo people move to the nursing home or whatever. There's this stage that has to happen. And we need to see that. You said, I'm not sure what it is. Like, I think we need to just see that shift. We need to see people that are moving out of those forever homes so that the people in the starter homes can move and then open up something appropriate.
The dominoes we've always talked about.
Because,
right.
I'll age myself, but going back, my parents bought a house for their first house for $30,000, and we bought our first house for 60 or 65, and now you can't touch anything for 100 or 125. That's the new starter home. So if it's always doubling, what's going to happen? It's going to continue to go up.
Right.
But there has to be starter homes available for people to buy.
Now, how much, not to get political, but how much do you think politics play a role in real estate, especially being an election year?
I feel like people are talking about it, and it seems to weigh on their mind. It really does. Chris Lee, Edward Jones, was just talking about this then too. He pulled up a good stat. It showed people have that fear, but ultimately, if you look at the stock market and you look at housing prices, it doesn't seem to matter what side gets elected. In the end, there's kind of those volatile shifts in the short term, but overall, it doesn't seem to matter. But I think it does weigh in.
It definitely puts people in a fight or flight kind of standpoint, or more or less they're frozen, which I think might have been part of what happened in August. It was a very weird month, and I know back to school changes things, but like I feel like there was just this great freeze that happened.
Right.
And I don't know if maybe it was politics and people were just watching to see what the heck was happening, but I don't know if you guys are with me. It just felt like we were just stuck, and it was from maybe the first or the end week of July through almost the end of August. It was just this really
still seems
weird,
to be that way. It really
frozen,
does. Yeah. Yep. It kind of, we tell people a lot of times, like around school, when school's starting, people want to be, when they're buying a house, settled into their house before school starts, or they want to wait till school's in, schedules are situated, and then they can then move again. Mom's schedule's got to work, so they got to make that happen. But it seems like with the election impending then right away then too, it's just kind of been in freeze frame. So I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know what the right answer is, but it seems like around here that definitely is a conversation. Whether it truly affects somebody's decision whether they're moving or not, I don't know.
I kind of feel like maybe that older demographic are the ones who pay a little more attention to the politics, to where your millennial types kind of don't really care.
Right. And the rates too, because that coincides with what, when are they cutting rates and so on. So I think those two definitely went hand in hand.
Yep. I think it goes a lot of times too. You just tell people like, hey, is life working for you right now? If it's not, if you need a bigger house, smaller house, kids are moving in, moving out, whatever. Is that really going to matter who gets elected, red or blue?
Right.
You still need a roof over your head.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it just depends on the situation. There's just so many what ifs, rates, election, everything going on. So
that's exactly, I like that you brought that up, because I especially feel like with the younger generations, it's more of a, if I'm ready to do this, or if I can do this, I'm just going to do it. I'm not really worried about what's going on with that. Whereas with the older generations, if they're in a position where they don't necessarily need to move, but they're thinking about it, that might be something that they're putting more thought into, just because they have more leverage with that own situation. Whereas when you're younger and all of a sudden you can't afford to purchase your first home and you're ready to do that, it's kind of like, okay, well, who cares? That has nothing to do with anything. Let's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So on a big part of it too, the different types of mortgages. So getting into fixing houses and things like that then too. VA, FHA, USDA. That probably doesn't come up a whole lot. Do you get those calls for that? Probably for insulation. We don't get a whole lot of that. That would be
not really. I do have some good connections in the real estate world, because a lot of the times between the buying and selling, there's things getting tagged by the inspectors, whether it's insulation or a crawl space or something like that. And that's usually where I come into play, but I'm just kind of the middleman there to do the work. Right. It really doesn't matter to me what type of loan it is or interest rate or anything like that. They just call me to do the work, so I go do it.
So then the crawl spaces, that's a fun. We get this with condos every now and again then too, to where they want, or anything with a crawl space. So I don't understand how you get into these crawl spaces. And I know if you're listening, you can't see. He's a big dude,
Right.
good looking dude, big dude. But how's he get into this
I
stuff?
tell everybody I don't know why a big guy like me decided to squeeze into little tiny crawl spaces, but you'd be surprised what I can fit into.
That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
But to get into that here real quick, we got some questions with that we'll come back to here real quick. But yeah, I just want to finish up on this, and we'll talk about this in a later podcast. As far as it surprised me, FHA, VA, how much more of a impact that's going to have. I had a cool chart. I can't find it at the moment. Yeah, here we go. If you can see, so the FHA and VA, where that's taken, so you go all the way back to like 2008. It was right before 2008. The private mortgage insurance was way higher. FHA, VA was real low. After the housing collapse, I guess it really spiked. So it's been holding pretty strong then. So we're seeing still a lot of FHA, VA. Sarah, you and I are working on one right now that's an FHA. So I don't think it's anything for sellers to be scared of. They kind of have that bad stigma of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard to sell my home. Is this going to make problems? So, but most time it's nothing. It's not that hard to get through a lot of these things. They just kind of a bad rap for whatever reason.
It seems more overwhelming than it is sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and a lot of times it depends on the appraiser. You get some house you figure it's going to be just a nightmare to get through, and they're just like, oh, nope, it's fine. And then one you think is going to fly, no problem, and they've got a list of things that need done. So
I just remember when we purchased our house, we put in an offer, it got accepted, and I think it was a week later COVID hit.
Oh, man.
And then all the paperwork, everything just stopped. And
Really?
it took us forever to get into that house.
Oh my gosh, that's very stressful.
It was. It was. I think it took us about 4 or 5 months before we finally got everything pushed
close?
through. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was. It
And
was
it
kind of a
wasn't
nightmare.
issues with the house. It was just
There
issues with
was some
communication.
issues with the inspector, but a huge part of it was just the paperwork ended up moving at a snail's pace because of COVID, and
No one knew what to
nobody
do,
knew what to
and
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the whole time was just upside down
Yeah.
for sure. So I guess I do remember you guys buying during that time then.
Yeah.
So fun time. So you're never going to move. It took forever to get into that house.
Right,
You're
right.
stuck there forever.
Yeah.
So all right. So if you're watching, you can follow along. If you get on the Facebook, I guess you have some other websites too, Dustin. Don't you? So Seneca Foam. So Facebook/Seneca Foam will take you to your website.
Yes.
With some cool pictures. Tell us what you got going on here. So pole buildings, I know it's kind of your bread and butter.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Pole buildings are nice, just because they're big and usually wide open. We can get in, get out. But we do a little bit of everything. We do residential, commercial, industrial, crawl spaces. I mean, there's quite a bit you can do with spray foam. We've used it to seal up foundations and old farmhouse foundations. Yeah, it's a pretty versatile product that we can do a little bit of everything with. We even get into some commercial roofing where we'll put down a layer of foam and then some sort of topper on top of that, like silicone or polyurea.
I didn't know you guys use that in roofing. When you told me that really surprised me, but it makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, spray foam is one of those. I tell everybody, it's kind of the best you can get on the market right now. It is kind of your more pricier option, but if you can afford it in the long run, it's going to save you a ton of money on your energy costs.
Sure. So how long, like a project that we're looking at here now, because there's a lot of basements in our area that look like this or worse. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, usually basements, we can get it out in a day or two, depending on the situation. I mean, sometimes, there's some extra prep work that has to go into something like that. As far as making sure the walls are clean and dry, because if they're not clean enough or dry enough, the foam won't stick.
Not gonna stick.
That's what I was
Right.
going to ask too, because there's a lot of them, like you take a broom and just barely
Yeah.
dust it and just stuff crumbles. And that's
Right.
like most houses in Tiffin because, they're older homes. So
I mean,
the prep
usually
work.
as far as getting it sprayed, usually a day or two tops. But like I said, it could be a little bit longer depending on the prep work. If we got to go through and brush down walls or get rid of, a lot of that loose plaster, and if it's really wet behind that plaster, then we got to bring in dehumidifiers and draw all that moisture out to make sure that foam gets a good stick. But just something as easy as having your basement sprayed. I mean, you're going to improve air quality. You can see up to a 30% reduction in your heating costs. On top of that, you're going to add strength to that foundation with the closed cell foam. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with it.
That's a big difference between the bad insulation and
Yes.
that, right? Yep.
Yes.
That's because I didn't know you then, but when we built our house, we did this spray foam, and I didn't like the cost of it, but I'm glad we did it then. It seemed to make a big difference.
Right.
And that was kind of the argument then too. It makes the house, the structure itself, stronger apparently
Yes,
then too.
yes.
So
Yep. Yeah, I mean, because there are different types of foam. Generally, I like using a closed cell foam, or I usually recommend a closed cell foam. You don't have to go as thick, and because it cures harder, you're going to add strength to whatever you put it on, which that strength just ultimately ends up adding longevity to the building as well, because you're going to double the strength of your wall or roof line or whatever you put the spray foam on. So, yeah, there's a lot of benefits to spray foam that you don't get from what I call your traditional types of insulation.
Sure. So something like that, we're talking to people that are buying an existing home. You can do, it doesn't have to be new construction, right? I mean, you can go basements, you can do renovations, you can do.
There's a lot of, I guess you could say, misconception. What we do is spray foam. So most our market is rebuild, new models, things like that, where the drywall is already off the wall and we can actually spray in between each cavity. There's also foam injection, which we don't do, but that's where they go through. They'll drill a little hole in each cavity, shove in a tube, and then actually pump in the foam. Slightly different type of foam than what we spray. And kind of a different setup as far as the machines. But generally what we do is spray foam. So even if you have walls that are existing or drywall still up, we can still help you in other areas like your attic or your crawl space, things like that, basements, garages.
Well, I think that would help with value on a house. I mean, if somebody's wondering that, if that's
I think so.
a value add to a home, you're listing it for sale, it'd certainly be something I would add to the description, I would think then. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I tell everybody spray foam is kind of the Cadillac insulations,
I like that.
You can have a Ford Escort or you can have a Cadillac.
Oh, I like that. That's nice.
Well, we have really hot summers and we have really cold winters. So there are a couple of months out of the year where specifically that would be super beneficial. And then all year round, obviously.
Yeah. One of my reps, Joe Gift with Geico, very knowledgeable guy. I've been with them for quite a few years. He's told me over the phone, over the years as these energy efficiency ratings and everything else keep going up and up and up, he says basically it's going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to insulate a house without spray foam.
Really?
To meet some of those energy regulations and EPA and government stuff. So
Now, do you know, are you going to be with us in 10 years? It's going to be something they're going to find out that you're going to be dead or poisonous then at that point?
As far as I know, no. Like I tell everybody, there are some fumes associated while we're spraying.
Sure.
And with the cure time, but once everything's installed and cured after that, should be no hazards.
Sure.
But generally, we tell the customers to be out of the area while we're spraying until it's ventilated properly. But after that,
You're
it's
good to
just
go.
foam.
I've only been around it a couple times, and I think you're right. Well, obviously you're right. You're with it, but I mean, being around it right afterwards was different than a couple days later. You didn't even know it then.
And sometimes we even tell the customers, hey, you shouldn't be in this area, and then also, and you get to spray, and all of a sudden you turn around and they're standing right there watching you. So, you got to chase them off. But
so on that note, my wife Kelly is perpetually cold. Could you just spray foam her directly?
Absolutely.
Would that help?
right. Make her a spray foam jacket.
Keep her warm then.
We would have probably benefited from that this morning.
Yeah,
Right.
no kidding.
Oh man! So what are you talked to some of the uses then too? So I mean, what else? I mean, is there anything goofy you use spray foam for? I mean, is it just mainly just?
Oh, I mean, like I said, we get into a little bit of everything where we've done exterior foundations, interior foundations. We've done trailers up at the lake. Something I've had people come to me to use spray foam for landscaping.
Landscaping.
Yes. Basically, we would spray out a block of foam, and you can shave it, carve it, paint it. I've been told, I don't know how true it is, but I've been told like Disney World, some of their statues,
like amazing pools and all that kind of thing. Like all the decorations around.
I've been told that some of those are made out of spray foam because not only do you get the look that you want, but then you don't need a crane to move it.
Sure.
So if it was a statue or something like that made out of concrete, obviously you're talking
what shapes can you make?
Yeah. Let's work on that.
I follow a lot of spray foam forums, and there's guys out there that will do whole Hollywood sets.
That's crazy.
In spray
my
foam. I
gosh.
seen a guy recently who was doing a dragon for I don't know, it was some kind of upcoming show or movie. But when I say dragon, I mean this thing was massive. I mean they were building it in like a 60 by 100 pole barn.
Oh my Lord.
And it was probably 20 foot tall.
Wow.
But basically they made a frame, and then he went in and spray foamed that frame, and then they shaved it up, carved it up, painted it, and you'd have no idea
That's
that it was made
awesome.
out of spray foam.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like wood carving, but more efficient.
Yeah.
Right. So that might be your next line of work then here too. So we'll look for that. All right. So we got some trivia questions here. We'll see we'll use ChatGPT to see what we come up with. I don't know if it's right or wrong. So what year was spray foam insulation first developed? 1940, 52, 63, or 70? We'll have you answer.
You want me to answer?
Yeah, you're the spray foam pro here.
I thought we were asking that.
I want you to know.
I mean, technically, it was made and invented in the 1930s.
Okay.
Except I've done my research on this because this is kind of something I get asked quite commonly. How long has it been around? How did it start? But it was invented in the late 1930s by a German scientist, and then it was originally they started using it for military purposes, basically insulating railroad cars so that the way the provisions would last longer from point A to point B. After World War II, people started figuring out other uses for it.
That's cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
But it was slightly different foam back then than what it is now.
Oh, I'm sure. Like everything then. So true or false, we'll ask the girls here this. Spray foam can expand up to 100 times its original size.
Probably.
100 times.
I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
So it'd get way bigger. Let's say you spray a little dot of it and it gets 100 times bigger than that.
I guess. Yeah, I guess I'll say true.
True, so 2 trues, is that right?
I would say true. Yeah,
I don't know what the percentage, but I'm sure it's massive.
Yeah.
Depending on the type of foam, you can get quite a bit of expansion out of, say, a half-pound foam.
That just sounds like
All
a
right,
lot.
dumb girl question.
Yeah.
The stuff that you spray in a can that people try to block hornets' nests and stuff with, what's that stuff called?
Great stuff.
What is
the
it?
stuff in the can.
Oh, the stuff from Lowe's or whatever?
I don't.
Like
Yeah,
that?
it just is really ugly orangish.
Yeah, it's called great stuff.
Great stuff. Well, how does what that content is compared to spray foam?
Most of your spray foam chemicals are fairly similar. The stuff in the can, basically it's air activated in a way. What we do is it comes in 2 separate barrels and it doesn't mix until almost the end of the process. But
So it's
ultimately,
like JB Weld?
Yeah,
Squirt it
yeah,
together?
yeah, pretty much. So I mean, they're all kind of the same concept, same chemical. It's just a matter of how they're delivered, I guess you could say. What you got to look for, if you're looking at a spray foam, is there are different types. They're generally rated by density, and it can go anywhere from, and that density is rated on a weight. So you have anywhere from a half-pound foam, and they make all the way up to a 10-pound foam. But the heavier the density, the harder the foam and the less expansion you have. So each type of foam kind of has its place and its purpose in the construction world.
One thing that we talked about before when I first found out what you did was asking about, once you put that spray foam in a wall and you've got wiring, are those wires forever stuck there? And it kind of sounds like the density. Does that affect what wall you would use it in? And could you still rehab? I mean, that's a loaded question, all the things, but one thing that I'm thinking of is if I were to spray foam a whole room or a whole area and I decide that we need to redo the wiring or we need to redo the plumbing, how does that work?
Yeah, generally, so again, your lighter densities, your half-pound foam, I tell everybody that's similar to your packing peanut kind of material. It's real soft, real pliable. Even after I come in and spray it into your wall, you'd still be able to dig your fingers in there and rip out a chunk. Like I said, I generally like spraying a closed cell. Those cure a lot harder. But with a closed cell, you don't have to go as thick. So generally with an open cell, we're going, say, a minimum of 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches. Most residential settings, you're a 2x4 wall. So you're getting as much as you can in there. With a closed cell, generally 2 to 3 inches is all you need. But a lot of the times, 9 times out of 10, when we get to a project, wiring, plumbing, all that is done. And yes, we'll spray right over that. Not just because it's in our way, but it kind of helps seal those areas in. But like I tell everybody, with a closed cell, say you have a 2x6 construction building and we're only going 2 inches thick in your wall, and say you do have a wire that goes bad, that electrician's not going to show up and try to find the bad spot in the wire. He's just going to run a new wire anyways. So if you're only going 2 to 3 inches in a 2x6 wall, you're going to have plenty of room to run another wire.
Makes sense.
Sometimes when we get into a new construction, say we're doing an open cell, or even something to where it'd be difficult, like you said, to get those wires or plumbing or something like that out. Generally with wiring, if that's a concern, people will run conduit first and then just run their
Like a
wiring
channel
through.
or a cavity
Yes.
or something. That way
Yes.
they can always fish
Right.
through what they need.
Right.
That's what I did with my house. What they call it, flash and bat.
Yes,
Like they flash
yes.
it and then put the bat insulation afterwards, and
Yeah.
so that you could get in there. And 'cause I think they came into the electric afterwards, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember.
Yeah. Regardless, it doesn't really matter to us whether electric and plumbing is there. I usually tell the customers, though, you'll probably save your electrician and your plumber a lot of cussing if it's in first. So.
Sure, sure. You don't care what's there. You'll just spray over top of
Right,
it. Then.
right,
So-
right. Make sure your pets are out of the way.
All right. So that's a question for you then, too. What's the craziest thing you found in all the years of doing this? What's the craziest thing you found in a basement or an attic or a
man.
fun situation?
Last year, I mean, we run into animals, a lot of animals, bats, salamanders. Every now and then in a crawl space, you'll be doing some work, run into a salamander. My own attic, we were up there spray foaming it, and I had a bat fall out at me. You'd be surprised, especially crawl spaces. A lot of the times, people. I'm not trying to bash contractors, but sometimes, depending on the contractor, they'll use a crawl space almost like a trash pit.
They're just leaving everything down there?
Yeah. At the end of the day, they just shove it into the crawl space and expect nobody's ever going to see it again. And I mean, you'll run into boots, clothes, all sorts of stuff. So, but no, usually animals. Like I said, bats, salamanders. I haven't ran into anything too big yet.
Nothing cool, no treasures, no hidden compartments full of cash.
No treasures. I mean, every now and then you might find a tape measure left over from a previous contractor or something like that. But usually my concerns when I first get into a crawl space is there anything bigger than me down here? But haven't ran into anything like that yet. Usually just, like I said, salamander, frogs, snakes, spiders, all that
Snakes,
spooky
that's
stuff.
fine.
Gosh,
Perfect for Halloween
absolutely
time,
not.
huh?
Everything my wife would love. Me too. That's,
At least you're in Northwest
yeah.
Ohio and
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
Right.
It's not like I'm running
Texas
into
or
grizzly
the
bears. or
Everglades.
something.
Yeah, right.
The mountain lion down there waiting for us.
Right,
So.
right.
But that does, spray foam helps keep them critters out, like, because
Right.
Kelly's scared of spiders and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
helps with a lot of that.
And that's something too. I don't ever tell anybody spray foam is rodent proof. I mean, I've seen rats and mice chew through steel before if they want something bad enough on the other side. But compared to your traditional types of insulation, your bat, your blown in, that stuff's real soft, and as soon as they get into it, they're in. Where at least spray foam gives them a little more of a fight, so it tends to kind of make them look elsewhere.
All right. So, man on the street, how do we improve the real estate market? What's the fix? Because we don't know. We want to see what your thoughts are.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot with that one. I can tell
Switching
you,
gears.
don't have 5 kids.
Yeah.
That'll really drain the bank account. I don't know. I'm one of them guys. I'm holding on to my money to see where interest rates go.
Right.
I'm holding on to kind of see political wise where things go. Even now, kind of in the construction world. I mean, this year compared to the last couple, it's been kind of up and down. I'm not saying we've been dead, but there's been times where we were slower than usual. But as far as making the real estate world better, I would just say keep doing podcasts.
Too, but so like in all seriousness, what would take for you and Olivia to move then? What would that look like
man.
then? I'm not trying to get you to move. We want you to stay right where you're
right.
at. But like if what would change that situation?
I know my wonderful and beautiful wife would love to eventually have something up by the lake. The house we're in now, she told me a while back, this was our 10-year house, and after 10 years, she wants to move up to the lake. And I said, well, you're probably with the wrong guy for that. But I think kind of like we mentioned, I think it'd be hard to, now that we got that 3% interest rate. Yeah, that's
It's so hard to look at.
it's so
anything
hard to
else.
look
Yeah.
at
You
anything
see that
else.
house payment, and you're just like, oh. Then it's like, okay, next
Right.
time I'm just buying with cash.
Right.
And then the interest rate won't affect me.
Right.
But that is a lot of people are in that same spot. They see
Yeah.
what their payment is now, and they say, "Well, I'd like to keep my payment the same." And I'm like, well, you couldn't. We talked about this previously. You couldn't even buy your own house right now.
Yeah.
Like the rates make such a big difference.
Right. Yeah, and even when we bought this house, the housing market was insane.
Sure.
It was absolutely insane. The house that we bought, we had another kid on the way, and we previously lived in a ranch style house, and we were just running out of room. And we had looked at a handful of houses. We'd look at it on a Thursday, and then come Friday, we'd throw in an offer, and it was already gone. So the house that we ended up in, I mean, it came up on the market that morning. We were there by lunch and had an offer in by the afternoon. And that's just how the market was. I mean, we had no other options. Kind of like our realtor told us, if you're going to sleep on it, you're not going to sleep in it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we just had to jump into it. And again, I mean, the price of houses were, I don't want to say high, but I mean, you almost had to give them what they wanted because they were going so fast. And to try to come in and undercut a price or come in a little bit lower than asking was almost
Wasn't
impossible.
happening.
Yeah, it wasn't happening.
So you guys are seeing that here yet too. I mean, there's some houses that they just sit, and other ones we're still fighting for. We just had one over the weekend we lost out on. So.
And that would one that came up over the weekend. You say, what would it take somebody to move in that interest rate? And it's just an amazing house. Like, if you're truly looking and you find the house for you, I think at that point you just pay what you pay because you really, really want it. Just like anything else, a vehicle, clothing, shoes, whatever. You see it, you're like, okay, I don't care what that price tag is. I have to have that.
Yeah.
And housing the same way.
I guess you could say maybe a little more negotiating room. Because anymore, like you're paying what the seller wants, and I think maybe that might deter some buyers because there's no negotiating. It's just, this is the price, this is what you're going to have to pay, and that's it.
And almost more on that then too, like the over the weekend one wasn't just the price. It's like puts you in a bad spot as a buyer. They a lot of times no inspections and just put a bunch of clauses into the contract that isn't
just to get it.
Yeah, that isn't in the buyer's favor, but just to make it happen. So. Yeah,
That's
that makes it tough.
It was my first year, which would have been end of 21 into 22. I was so stressed because obviously I was learning so much. And at the same time, it was just as you had said, house goes on the market at 8 a.m. You need to be there by 12.
Yeah.
And your offer needs to be in that day, probably before 5 o'clock.
Right.
And like, don't ask for an inspection, don't ask for this, don't ask for that. But then I'm also talking to my clients like, well, we always recommend a home inspection.
We always
recommend this. Yeah.
And they're like, no, screw that. Just write it up.
Just
I'm
write
like,
it
okay.
up.
Yeah, and I think maybe another thing people take note of would be material prices.
Yeah.
Especially as a contractor, especially recently after COVID, during COVID, price of everything skyrocketed. I was amazed at some of the bids I was putting out for projects because they were triple what I normally would have been doing.
Well, your cost is triple for material, so what are you going to do?
Especially with spray foam being kind of your higher end insulation. It's already going to cost you a little bit extra. Well, now once COVID hit, my chemical prices just skyrocketed.
Right.
And like I said, even to where I was just mind blown at some of these prices I was putting out. Now, granted, those prices have come down, not to where they originally were, but I think that's also something people take into consideration, especially if they're looking at something maybe a little cheaper than what their budget is. Maybe a fixer-upper. They're going in, into these situations, and instantly they're thinking, well, lumber prices, and drywall prices, carpeting prices, something they might have been able to throw a little money at previously. That budget's going to be a little tighter now. So if they're walking into a fixer-upper and, their budget's not going to be as high as it would have been 3, 4, or 5 years ago.
No, and now the fixer-upper that used to be 45 is now 90.
Right.
It's still a fixer-upper.
Right.
Have the prices come down? Have you noticed on some of the material costs and things?
I think lumber's I think nothing's back to what it was pre-COVID, and I don't think it ever will be.
Sure.
Inflation and everything else, but I think things are a little more reasonable, but I still think they're kind of up there as far as where people would like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something I think too that anyone listening or watching is you don't want to miss on an opportunity if you're building a house or if you're utilizing an FHA 203K or some type of rehab loan and really going through a house, which we have a lot of those houses that really could use a once over or make it your dream house. I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk to someone like yourself and add that Cadillac insulation and make that work. So you guys got any other questions for Dustin? I got one. So if you're ever bored on a weekend and you need an invitation for a party bike, don't expect him to call you on that then too, because he'll leave you.
That would be Aaron Shade.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give a shout out to Aaron Shade. And I would just like to let them know that I made it on the podcast first.
Yes, you did.
So
That's awesome. All right, well, we've talked long enough here. We'll bring you back sometime here. And it is fascinating. When you first talked about spray foam, I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
But
spray foam is one of them things where there's still a lot of customers who don't know anything about spray foam.
Sure.
Obviously, because of that, I've seen some customers get taken advantage of.
Sure.
But I also get those calls where, hey, I saw this on TV. Can you give it to me?
Right.
And they really have no idea what it does or how it works or anything like that. So a lot of what I try to do is just educate people on, the different types of spray foam and benefits of each type and what's suitable for their situation.
All right, cool. Well, on that, I think one of the topics next week we didn't get to today was 10 things new agents do that can annoy their clients or other agents then. I kind of wanted to get a hot take on that from everybody then. But we'll leave it at that for now. That is episode 6. We will see you on episode 7. Thanks for tuning in.